Hey, it's David. Today I'm working on the clutch on my KTM 390 Duke. The reason for that is that I've run out of adjustment on the clutch cable. So there's no way I can adjust the clutch any further. It's fully adjusted up, and yet when I hit peak torque I can feel the clutch start to slip, and you'll see the revs flick up at the same time. So there are three possible causes for this. It's most likely that the clutch plates are in need of replacement. Now the bike's quite low mileage, so that shouldn't really be the case. On the other hand, I do a lot of low speed work, so it's certainly possible, and I certainly slip the clutch a lot, so definite possibility. Second possibility is that there's something broken inside the clutch. That's also possible. And third possibility, or not necessarily a possibility, but could be a contributing factor, is I've got an aftermarket clutch lever on the bike. And when you change a clutch lever, they don't necessarily have the same amount of travel on them. They may tuck up more of the inner cable than the stock lever does, which means you will run out of adjustment early. If that's the case, I have something in mind I'm going to try to see if I can alter the way the clutch cable sits in the bike, but we won't really know until we get into it. So the first thing we need to do is to lay the bike down so that we can access the clutch cover. Now I've had to remove one of my crash bars to do this because it covers the actual clutch cover, and the fact that this is how the factory do it tells you that you are dealing with a dirt bike manufacturer, because this is just such a dirt bike thing. So let's dig into it. So you can see I've got the bike leant over. It's propped up on one handlebar so that it's not quite lying on its side, and this is where you do have to be careful with your fuel level. I've only got about a quarter of a third of a tank of fuel, so I can get away with this. If you've got a full tank, it's going to risk leaking out the top or through the drain tubes, so you might need to empty it or just wait until you've got less fuel in the tank. So with this done and the bike safely here, it's not going anywhere, we can dig into the clutch cover and see what's going on. We'll start by removing the clutch cable. You're going to have to adjust the clutch afterwards anyway. So the first thing we need to do is, in the top here there is a locking tab, and what you need to do is get a small bladed screwdriver and just bend that locking tab out the way, because it prevents the cable from coming undone. Now I've already done it from the last time I was working on my clutch, so what we need to do now is to push this in and then release the clutch cable like so. And with that out the way, we need to actually undo the clutch cover here and lift it off. First thing you want to do though is give it a quick clean around here, so that when you take it off, no dirt falls into the clutch. Now you can expect to need a new gasket on this when you're rebuilding, so don't start until you've got one of those. Even though we've got it lying on its side, you can expect some oil spillage, and you will need to check the oil level once the bike is done. So we just want to crack these off. Now ideally you should do these in a diagonal fashion. And then we can spin them off. I don't know yet whether they're all the same length. It's always good practice to lay them out in a pattern of how they actually came out. and you'll just need to tap it. Should never lever these off. You might be tempted to hit them with hammers and stuff, but it's never good practice. And you can hear the sound change. It's when it comes loose. Just pull up on it and just tap around. It will come loose eventually. But these are cast alloy covers. If you lever on them, you do risk things just snapping off because it has no tensile strength in that sense. This is the clutch basket, so this is the part that we are interested in. So the next thing we need to do is to remove these bolts here, and then we can actually lift the pressure plate off. When you're doing this, try and lay things down in the same order and in the same orientation as you've taken them off, because things are slightly different even if they don't look like it at first glance. One of the things to note here, for example, is that this outer plate here locks into these grooves, whereas all of the other plates are a tooth out. So it's this sort of detail that you want to watch when you're coming to do this, because if you put this back with that plate with it down there, it's not going to work. We can also see that this gasket didn't survive at all, so we need to clean this all off, both sides, carefully, without making any marks and without losing anything down into here. So when I come to do it, I will probably pack this with paper and then scrape the gasket off. But let's get on with this. So the pressure plate springs are behind here. So this is sprung loaded. One other possibility for clutch slip is that these springs aren't strong enough. I've heard tell people of adding extra clutch plates in to make it stiffer. It all depends how much stack height you've got and how much clearance there is. What I may be doing is fitting some stronger springs in here. I'm not sure if that's going to be a good idea or not, because it will make one finger clutching harder, so I might not do it. And with the springs out the way, we can now remove the pressure plate. You can remove this rod here separately. It will normally sit in there. So here we've got the first clutch disc, and it doesn't look like there is a lot of wear left on it. Now this is the one, if you remember, went into this, not this, where the rest are. And it's also bigger and different to the others. It's a larger hole here because it sits on this outer one. And we can take these out. Now these are a little bit discoloured. Looks like they've overheated a bit. Sharp side is out. Rounded side is in. So these are the steel plates that the actual clutch discs wear against. These look worn out. So take them off and put them down in the same orientation. They tend to come in one lump. Yeah, I think the cause of my problem is almost certainly a lack of clutch surface, but we need to measure that to make sure. So you can pull them in larger lumps, and still they are rounded side in. Have a look, check for damage. If there's any damage, you'll need to replace the pressure plates as well, but normally you can just replace the discs. Still rounded side in. Okay, so that's down to the clutch basket itself. So this is a part that's connected directly to the gearbox. So you've got two halves to the clutch basket. You've got the inner and the outer, and it's the clutch plates that connect these two. The two sides can spin independently. So when you've got a clutch disc in there, you'll notice that these hook into the outside, whereas these hook into the inner section here, and that's all the clutch does. So that'll sit down in there. When those two get clamped together, they link the two, the inner and the outer, and then drive is transferred from the engine through to the transmission. So these are the complete stack of discs and pressure plates that we took out. Now the minimum stack height is 32. So my stack height is 31.3. So that's definitely the source of my problem. It's not my clutch lever. It's not that there's anything broken. So 1.35. Yeah, I'm below minimum stack height, and that's why it's slipping. And from the overheating, I can see that I'm slipping the clutch a lot. So I have my stack of new clutch plates. Or clutch discs, I should say. So I'm now going to go and soak these in oil. Really should have done it overnight, but I wasn't sure whether I'd need them, so I didn't. So, but anyway, I'm going to go soak these, have a cup of tea, have a break, and then come back and fit them. Take your time and be careful with this, because you don't want to create scratches in this surface, because then it'll leak. And while we're here, we can also measure our spring heights. And that's about, without squashing them, that's about 51. 51.6, something like that. 51.8, depending on where you're measuring it on the spring. And that's within spec. So we checked our spring heights. Minimum spring height is 50mm. These are within. I'm given that it was just the clutch plates were worn out, I'm going to stay with the stock springs for now because I don't want to interfere with the clutch control. So what we've got now is we can start rebuilding the clutch. When you're refitting the disc, you have to note there are two different clutch discs, one of which has a bigger diameter here, so these are smaller. Now these go in, the small one, or the one with the larger diameter, goes in first. There's a metal ring at the bottom here. So that sits over that. If you try to put one of these down, it would fall on top of that ring and not fit. So then you can start rebuilding the clutch, and remembering sharp side is up or out. So those are all the standard discs now on top of that one. Now the last pressure plate here is also thinner. So we need to put the thinner one on here. Now you'll see this doesn't match up anymore because it is larger, and that's because it sits on the pressure plate like so. That's what it locks into. We need a clutch discs here because that locks against that surface there. Then we've got this one, and then that one will sit in there. And don't forget we offset this one too. So these tabs are all stacked up there, but for the top one it goes just off, so just fiddle it around so it goes in. Right, and there we are. Now we can put the springs back in and put the clutch back together. That's it. I'm reusing the stock ones because they are within spec. And if I used the stronger ones, I probably wouldn't be able to one finger clutch quite so easily. So given the problem seems to be that just that I've worn the clutch out, I'm going to leave it alone. Note that it's marked out, and I suspect front on here. I left the screws in so I know which way around it went. These are 10 Newton meters. So we put a new gasket on. I'll hook it over the dowels. Not perfect fit, is it? But I guess it will do. Make sure that gasket is in there properly. Now, for some reason my lever came out. I think I might need to. Okay, actually, so it's went pull it to this right, and then that's spring tension on there, so that's good. So now we can put the screws in. Make sure that screw goes through without breaking the gasket. So it's 12 Newton meters. Now we can put the clutch cable back in. Bear in mind, all of the adjustment now needs to be redone. And if you want to bend your locking tab back down, then do so. So I'm going to now put the bike back upright and work on the adjustment. And that's it, job done. Clutch plates changed. It's a simple enough job. Just take your time, especially when putting it back together, because you need to make sure that the pressure plate actually locks in to the plates, because that initially it can sometimes stick. So you've got to wiggle it about a bit, make sure that actually sinks in. It's a simple enough job, as I say. No reason why you can't do it, but just take your time, and once you've done, get it adjusted up, and job done. So thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.